Hi everyone. My name's Emma and I run this healing space BIPOC, and today I'm going to be talking to another Emma about her healing and spiritual practices today. Let me just see. Um, we're just going to wait a moment. Let me see. So Emma, if you could request to join the live, and then I can accept you. Hopefully that works. Okay, so we should be. Hi.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Are you?
Yes, I'm good, thank you. Had a few little technical difficulties, but it worked in the end. So yeah, I'm good, thank you. So what I will do, Emma, is we'll just introduce ourselves to begin with, and I'll let you introduce yourself and say whatever, comes to your heart that you want to share with people, and then we can go into our discussion as well. So thank you for those of you who are joining me live, or if you're joining on the replay. If you do have any questions, just pop it into the comment and I'll try and get to it while we're on the live, or you can also put it into the replay as well. So my name is Emma, and my pronouns are she, her, and I am African Caribbean and white British, and I live in the UK. I live in the Midlands in a place called Northampton. Yeah, it is what it is. And I am a yoga practitioner, meditation practitioner, and interested in Buddhism, African spiritual traditions, and decolonizing as well. So these talks, we are exploring women of colour and their healing and spiritual practices, and also honouring the traditions as well. So Emma, if you'd like to go and introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name's Emma. I too live in the Midlands in the
Okay.
UK, in Nottinghamshire, small town in Nottinghamshire.
Okay. Not too far from me.
No, not too far at all. And like you, I'm mixed race. So my mum is white British and my dad is Afro-Caribbean from Jamaica.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Same. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I practice a range of spiritual slash magical traditions that kind of span my heritage, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So I practice British witchcraft,
Mm-hmm.
as well as Obeah, which I often describe to people who don't know what it is as Jamaican witchcraft, just
Mm-hmm.
for ease of understanding, as well as Verdun. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's a mixture that kind of represents my heritage.
Mm-hmm.
I'm she, her pronouns. Um, so yeah, I write a lot. One of the main places I write for is Gods and Radicals, and they are very much pagan, anti-capitalist.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's quite
Brilliant.
a broad, yeah, it's quite a broad banner, and lots of things come
Mm-hmm.
under the banner. So really exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, there's so much to talk about really in your traditions and your stories, really. I think actually a good place to just start is just to clarify for people who maybe are new to these practices and traditions, just for you to give a little brief overview so people understand. So maybe if we could start with Obeah first, and just, from your own experience and language, how would you explain to people what that is?
Yeah, so like I said, I often, and it's quite a simple kind of explanation for people who don't necessarily know what it
Mm,
is. And so I can describe it as Jamaican witchcraft. It's a
mm,
bit of a misnomer. It's a spiritual
mm,
tradition,
mm,
and it's very much based in spirit work.
mm,
But
mm,
there's a lot of parallels between Obeah and British witchcraft. Like the more
mm,
folk magic variety. In that
mm,
both were affected by the same anti-witchcraft laws
mm,
in
mm.
think it was like the 17th or 18th century. Both of them were affected. And in Jamaica, Obeah is still illegal to practice. So I think that's part of why it kind of is dying out. So there's an author, and her name's Eugenie O'Neill, and she wrote a book, and I think it's called Obeah, Race and Racism, or something like that. And she was giving an interview about it, and so I was just listening, and you know, it was really sad because she spoke about it hasn't really enjoyed the same kind of revival, if that's the right word, as some of the other spiritual traditions in the diaspora. And it was really, and part of that does come from the fact that it is illegal in Jamaica.
I mean, I was, because I obviously know Jay, who is one of your mentees. So, you know, she's kind of, I've been introduced to Obeah in the last couple of months. And something that I said to Jay, like, because it's a book club, I said, what are the books that I could read about Obeah? And she sent me a list. But actually what I noticed was, like, there isn't actually that many Jamaican Obeah practitioners who actually written the book. So it was, I think it's like Diane Patton, who is an English teacher here. So she's got a lot of books on it. There was another one that I read, but again, they weren't from Jamaica. So I mean, it makes sense that if it's illegal, people can't actually write a book. They can't share from within the tradition the true practices. And I think that's quite a shame, actually, that there isn't the recognition from the actual practitioners who it's part of their lives and their heritage, but they're not actually able to share it, and they're not able to you know, explain and actually challenge some of the misconceptions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you know, I run a Obeah mentorship program, and there's about I've got about 7 people in that group. And so I started with around 15, and I always knew that as we progressed, some people would fall away because, you know, for a multitude of reasons. But I can always remember when we first started and someone asked, is there a book of invocations or a book of rituals I can get about it? And the answer is, for the most part, no, there isn't. Part of that is because it is an oral tradition for the most part. So you would learn under somebody, you know, it's not like a study as such in the way that we might understand it. And also, like, the books that are available, they tend to fall into 2 broad categories. Some of the older books are written from a colonial perspective. So some of the older books that you might find have heavily racist undertones, and it's more of a looking in. And then some of the other books that you can find, they are about Obeah from a historical perspective, but you very rarely find something that a book that will tell you how to practice, or a book
and what it is. Definitely. And I think that's something that I noticed, really, just from doing some very basic research. And, like, I understand why it's an oral tradition. It had to be kept secret because it's very dangerous, and it still is dangerous to put it out there, you know, in different places in the Caribbean. But yeah, it was, I suppose, from somebody who, from a Jamaican heritage, who knew nothing about Obeah at all, even for me to, like, find out, like, what is it? It was very difficult just to, you know, luckily I was connected to Jay, and she was able to, like, give me, like, the most amazing overview. She gave a great presentation. I did say to her she should write a book because it was so thorough, and I thought, wow, you know, so many there's so many misconceptions, and it would, you know, just for people who they just don't know. That's the thing. If you're not connected in any way, how would you actually learn about this?
Well, and that's it. And I think for many people who are experimenting and maybe exploring different spiritualities, whatever that is, I think for a lot of us in the UK, like growing up back in the day, Before like the internet in the home became the
mm,
normal kind of thing.
mm, mm.
Most people, myself included, only had access to like what was in the local library. So you'd go on down, have a look, and find a book on Wicca. Now,
Yeah.
there's absolutely nothing wrong with Wicca at all.
Mm,
But for myself, you know, you kind of try and make it fit for a long time, because for a long
mm,
time you don't realise that there's more out there. There's more
mhm.
just
Yeah.
Wicca and Western
Yeah.
esoteric and spiritual traditions. And so,
Mm,
you know, you're exploring and you're constantly exploring and changing. But
mm,
then,
mm.
you know, when I was in that stage, I always felt that I was ignoring one half of myself, you know.
Right.
Um,
Mhm, mhm.
and that's when I really started to explore and try and find some information. But like you say, with Obeah, there's not
Mm,
a lot. Even on the internet today, there's
yeah.
not really a
Yeah.
lot. And what you do find, there is often a lot of contradictory information and
Okay. Mhm.
misinformation.
Mm, mm.
So it's really, really hard. But I was lucky in that I had someone who was able to teach me. So
Mm,
where I
mm.
live, there's quite a large Caribbean
Mhm,
community. So my grandparents came from Jamaica in the 50s. And
mhm,
like back in the day, the grandparent, well, the husband would come first, then the wife, and then the
mhm,
children would follow.
mm,
So
mm.
I think my dad came over when he was around 6 or 7.
Mhm,
Um, but, you know, there's a close-knit Caribbean community. And so I
mm,
was looking to find somebody who practiced Obeah. It was
mhm,
a family friend. And it's one
mm.
of those things that is not even open, where, you know,
Right.
over here. It's not really open. So, but because I already had a witchcraft practice, like in place,
Mm,
like a
mm,
serious witchcraft practice in place,
mm.
I can remember going to this person's house, and just there was, I don't know, there's little things that I would spot here and there that reminded me of witchcraft. And then after a
Okay.
while, I kind of asked them about it, and then it kind of
Right.
came from there. So,
Right. And so can I ask, like, so you said it wasn't very open about this person
mhm.
practicing. How did people respond to you? I suppose, firstly, practicing witchcraft and then also Obeah, because, you know, Jamaica is a very, very Christian dominated country. I was reading that it has the most churches per square mile or
Yeah,
something.
that's right.
I was like, wow. So
I know.
these practices were heavily demonized by Christianity and still are. So if you don't mind saying, just like, how was your experience sharing this part
I
of
think
yourself
like
with people?
I'm very open about what I
Mm,
practice. So when people come to my home, it's very clear
yeah,
about what I do, because there's like
yeah,
pointers everywhere.
yeah.
Um, and so I think for the most part, most people who don't understand what witchcraft is, or they get their understanding from TV and media,
Yeah, yeah.
like they have a total misconception about what it is and what you do. And
Mm-hmm.
the way I practice, it's very much a spiritual tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, but, you know, it kind of falls into two main responses. People are either really interested and they want to find
Mm.
out more, or they're kind of like, what are you doing? Like, that's
Right.
nonsense. But,
Yeah.
you know, and the thing is, my grandma, when she was alive, she was like very religious. So you'd go around to her
Right.
house and there'd be like pictures of various biblical scenes on the walls, and you know what I mean? But it's not really something that's filtered down to like my aunts and my own dad, and
Mm-hmm.
they're not really ultra religious, you know, it's
Right.
not really a
Yeah.
big thing. And I suppose they might call themselves Christian, but like they go to church when it's, I don't know, a christening or a wedding or that kind of thing. It's not something that's really major in our lives. So for
Yeah.
me, in that respect, I suppose it was a lot easier than some people
Yeah.
my experience if their family are really quite seriously religious. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, my experiences have mostly been okay once you kind of navigate the disbelief and
Yeah.
explaining to people what it is you actually do. Once
Yeah.
you take the time to kind of let them know, you know, and talk about it. Actually, most people are really interested in it and want to
Mm-hmm.
find out a bit more. So
That's
my
really,
experience has been
yeah.
overall pretty positive.
Because I have another Instagram page which is about African spiritual traditions. It's just documented my own learning and, you know, what I'm finding out and sharing it with people. And one thing that, a couple of things that have come up. So one of the things is hearing from people, you know, from the continent and the diaspora, and they're saying um, they're starting to learn about it, but they're getting the pushback from their family members, and they just kind of were sharing like it's quite challenging for some who
Yeah.
are, you know, maybe within a more family members who are within a tradition that is against
Yeah.
African belief systems. Is there anything you could maybe like give advice to people who might be finding that they really want to learn, but there's a lot of like pushback and you
Yeah,
know,
absolutely. And let me just start by saying that I have received pushback, but it's
of course,
generally from people outside. So just recently, so a while
yeah,
ago, I wrote an article, and it was just a brief introduction about some of the spirits that we work with in Obeah. And so I wrote it, put it on my blog, and left it out there. And then just recently, I had a comment from a guy, I think he's in America, and you know, he really wasn't happy that some mixed race
mm,
person living in the UK was practicing this tradition, and you know, he went off on a bit of a rant, and
sure,
so there is always pushback of some kind. But the thing
yeah,
is, wherever that pushback comes from, whether it's some random internet stranger or your own family, I think if it's something that you're really serious about and
mm-hmm,
you're really wanting to take it further, you have to have those boundaries in place, and you
mm-hmm,
have to be willing to say to people, if you want to be open with it,
yeah, yeah,
um, then you have to be willing to say to people, look, that's fine, that's your opinion. However,
mm-hmm,
this is something I'm going to do.
yeah,
And it's not always easy to say that when it's maybe your close family or whatever. But if it's something that is really meaningful to you and it's something that you feel you just have to practice,
yeah,
then you know you do have to set those boundaries. Boundary
right,
setting, like one of the biggest things I am, you know, telling people, don't be
mm,
afraid to set those boundaries, because actually if you don't, you're going to spend most of your life being miserable to some extent because you can't express what it is you really feel, and
yeah,
you know you can't explore something that is really truly meaningful to you. So
mm,
boundary setting is the biggest thing.
yeah, and I suppose also it's the whole practice of people reconnecting to the African spiritual roots and traditions is quite a radical um, act in this day and age, because for so many years it was completely illegal, it was banned, it was people were killed for practicing these traditions. So, you know, I think there is going to be some fear for some people
Yeah,
because it wasn't allowed. It was just completely against, you know, it was not safe to practice.
yes, absolutely. And I
Mm,
think so, as well with the boundary setting, you know, and you kind of have to play it by ear. So it might be, if
mm,
someone in your family is really fearful of what you're doing, it might
mm,
just be taking the time to sit down and have an open and frank discussion,
mm,
um,
mm,
and that's really important. But you can only really do that if the other person is willing to sit down and listen with an ear
exactly.
to understanding. If
Yeah.
the other person is totally against it and they're not going to listen to
Mm-hmm,
any kind of rational explanation or your own opinion,
mm,
then that's when like hard boundaries need to come
yeah.
in.
Yeah. And
So
it may
you can,
not worth explaining, is it really, if they don't want to listen?
yeah, you can't force anybody to listen, unfortunately.
No.
So if you find that they are really just against it, and you know, even
Mm,
after you've taken the time to explain what it is and what you're doing and how it's,
mm,
you
mm,
know, probably not what that other person thinks it's going to be, if they are
mm,
then still kind of really dead set against it, and then that's when you do have to put in those hard
mm,
boundaries, and
mm.
you know, as hard as that can, it's not an easy thing to
No,
do,
no. But you have to
especially with
protect
your family.
yourself,
But
don't you?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Mm,
100%.
mm. So, something I was thinking, so obviously it's illegal in Jamaica. Do you have any connections with Jamaica and Obeah practices in Jamaica at all? Is it?
Um, not not particularly. Most of
Mm,
my family live in the UK. We've got like
mhm,
a few cousins in Jamaica, but the
mm,
majority of my family now live in the UK in various
yeah,
places.
yeah,
And so, you know,
mm,
it's it is
mm,
what it is, you know.
yeah. I was just curious about how people would practice in Jamaica, and you know how that would take place and what precautions they'd have to take, and you
Yeah,
know.
I think for the most part, for most people in Jamaica who might practice, like, I think it's more common in the country than in the major urban areas. Um, you know, and if you think about like the role of the Obeah practitioner, and it's almost similar to the role of like the cunning man or woman in like British spiritual or magical history. So, you know, the poor people in the country who might not have access to a doctor, or might not have had access to a doctor back in the day, either because of distance or finances or a mixture of the both, they would have gone to the Obeah practitioner for help. You know, a lot of people go or seek help on a wide range of matters, from love to finances. So like there's a broad scope, but you know, I think, and it's the same in most urban areas. If we think about where we live now in the UK, you know, in a lot of kind of urban areas, and this is where I kind of find a lot of crossover with the anti-capitalism stuff. It's like capitalism is almost the new spirituality, it's the new religion, you know. And so almost everything else, even if we look at Christianity in this country and some of like the major religions in this country, everything else, like capitalism comes first, and then everything else kind of slots in under that in various niches. So that's kind of what I think is happening globally.
Yeah, I completely agree, actually. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I suppose this whole coronavirus situation has proven that that's the most important thing, right? The finances, and making sure certain people are okay, other people, you know, they've been left, really. So, yeah, did you want to talk a little bit about that kind of intersection of anti-capitalism and your spiritual magical practices? And
because they do intersect massively, and like I often say to people when they ask about my magical traditions and my spiritual traditions, that actually it's not something that's separate to the rest of my life. Everything kind of comes together. And so with the anti-capitalist stuff, I guess that growing up, I lived in a very working class area. So I often describe myself as living in the sticks, and the town where I live is often classed as a rural town. So it's about, I think it's just under 20 miles outside of Nottingham.
Okay.
But you know, I live on a council estate. It's the one I grew up on, and it's often like the butt of many jokes, like from people who live in the town. You know, it's and really working class area. So growing up, like my dad worked at a scrapyard, my mum was a barmaid and then a cleaner, and so we were really working class, you know. And so money was always the thing that I had a happy childhood, don't get me wrong, but even as a small child, you always knew not to ask for something because you knew there was no money there anyway. And so I think that has really kind of underpinned my anti-capitalist stance, because you really see how you're treated differently by, you know, from when you're young and you're in school, even right up to you going to college and then applying for jobs, and you're thinking, you know, I've got to put my address where I live on my application. Are they going to judge me because of that? And so it all kind of comes into that. And I think a lot of people, again, don't really understand what anti-capitalism means, you know. So I write for God and Radicals, and they publish books as well. And I can always remember one of the editors sharing a comment from like a random internet stranger. And the comment went something along the lines of, oh, look, a pagan anti-capitalist trying to sell us stuff. And, you know, so that's not what anti-capitalism is. It doesn't mean that you're not valued for your work. In actual fact, that's what capitalism does. It means that people are not valued for their work. And we see it in kind of minimum wage jobs, for example. So I often have discussions with people, and they'll, you know, people often have a hot take, and one of those hot takes is often that people who don't earn enough money aren't working hard enough. And that is just like the biggest load of bull ever.
That's the biggest lie ever. They wanna travel around a little bit and see how hard people work. People who say that, I think they don't have a lot of experience with different types of work and with different types of people. I think they're in a very small sector where they're privileged, basically. Their
Yeah,
privilege protects them
absolutely.
from the kind of
Yeah,
long hours, very crappy pay, no
yeah.
benefit, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And I can always remember like being on Facebook and getting into a bit of a debate with a friend. So it was like a nice debate, you know.
Mm,
And so someone had said, well, and I think it was something about benefits or something,
mm,
you
mm,
know, and they said, well, if, you know, why don't those people get jobs, blah, blah,
yeah.
blah, blah, blah. And then, so I made the point that actually most people who you see who are on benefits, what is it now? Is it,
Universal
oh,
credit.
yes, that's the one. Most people who are on that are actually already at work. They're
Yeah,
what we call the working poor. So what that means is they're working full time and they still cannot
yeah,
afford to live. And when I say live, I mean like the very basics of
yeah,
survival.
yeah.
I think like if you look at the food bank usage, for example,
Mm,
most of the
mm,
people who use food banks are people who are already working,
mm,
um,
mm,
but the money doesn't go far enough. And oftentimes what you find is like the cut-off point for benefits, it
mhm,
really affects those people who come just after that cut-off point because, you know,
yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
and so that kind of informs a lot of my anti-capitalist.
Mm, mm, yeah. And I think people don't understand. I think sometimes it's like if you're a small self-employed person like I am teaching yoga, if I'm taking money, I'm a capitalist. It's like no,
Yeah,
I'm really
precisely.
not. I'm trying to do it in the most ethical way. I need to pay my
Yeah,
rent because I have a landlord. He's going to want the money. I
yeah,
can't. I don't live
exactly.
in the woods in a house that I've built by myself. Although
Unfortunately,
that would be nice.
yeah,
I would like that. But even if you're anti-capitalist, you still have to work within the capitalist system. We're all in it,
yes,
so we have
precisely.
to
Because
make
yeah, and
changes
like
and challenge it and imagining like a better future, a more equitable and humane. That's what it is.
yeah,
We want a humane system, really, if you're generally
yeah,
capitalist, because it's not humane, the system, for a lot
no,
of people.
no.
It's
And the
completely
thing is that
demoralizing.
yeah, for the capitalist system to work, there always has to be somebody at the very, very bottom. So it's not about elevating everybody.
Mhm,
There always has to be someone right at the bottom,
mhm, mhm,
and that's really how it it works and is successful. So yeah,
mhm.
I think sometimes there is that misconception where if you like you say you're a small business, you're not a capitalist. You're a small business. You know, we all have to
Mhm,
survive.
mhm.
You know,
Exactly,
and we
exactly.
all have food to buy and rent to pay or mortgage to pay, and yeah, so it all filters in. And this is
Mhm.
why I think the work that Gods and Radicals do is really important because it often reaches lots of people who may not have even
Mhm.
thought about what it means to be an
Right.
anti-capitalist.
Yeah, and I suppose from my own personal experience, I only realised what capitalism was until I went to university and studied
Yeah,
social work. I'd never even heard of, like, I didn't even know what capitalism was. It's not, there wasn't any, yeah, I wasn't aware of any of it, but I was always somebody who would try and stand up against injustices in different ways, which would always get
yeah,
me in trouble as a teenager, you know.
of course.
But I suppose our school system doesn't set us up to challenge the status quo. It sets us up to try and conform to a particular system and be quiet,
Yeah,
do what you got
yeah,
to
and
do.
exactly. And then so I often find that spirituality and
Mm,
pushing back and kind of reconnecting with the spirituality of our ancestors and where we come from is also that goes hand in hand with
mm,
anti-capitalism as well.
yeah,
So, you know, it all
okay.
kind of fits in together for me
Yeah,
and is
yeah.
really
I
tangible.
agree. I agree because it's again it's the humanity, isn't it? You're connecting to
Yeah,
your own humanity, your own spirit, which I think capitalism tries to disconnect us from our own
yeah,
spirit, intuition. We work past exhaustion. We have to keep pushing, and yeah,
absolutely.
it's a it can really be like soul destroying. Some jobs, they
Yeah,
literally destroy
a hundred
themselves.
percent, 100%. So I have a book out by Gods and Radicals, and it's called
Mm,
Reclaiming Yourself. And in it, it's
okay.
like practical steps on how people can just begin to start freeing themselves a little bit from the capitalist structure. And
Mm,
it starts off with, like we say, it starts off with the work-life balance, because actually what
mm,
you find is that and especially for people who are doing those minimum wage, hard labor jobs, you go to work for sometimes 12 hours a day, you come home and you're too tired to do anything else besides eat your tea and sit down and watch some mindless television before it all starts again the next day. And by that cycle, it actually keeps us down and it stops us from exploring those things that are really meaningful to us. And it takes a lot of effort and work to kind of start freeing yourself from that cycle, because like you say, you have to live, you have to survive, you have to put food on the table and all of those things. So yeah, and so the book really takes it in very small steps. So each chapter is reclaiming something else. So reclaiming food, reclaiming medicine, reclaiming our connection to the land wherever we find ourselves, the reclaiming our bodies and all of those kind of things. And it's just little tiny steps that people can take. Like, you know, you can pick up the book today and do some of the things in the book.
So very practical,
kind of
tangible ideas.
And I think that's where it has to start, even with spirituality, taking it back to the Obeah stuff. It has to start really small, because what I find anyway is that if we have these big ideas like, yes, I'm going to do this, and then you jump right in, but they fail because ultimately you end up burning out to some extent. And so it has to be little and often to really get the foundation right. And I think that's the same with rediscovering and reclaiming like the religions and spiritualities of our ancestors.
Definitely. So just to kind of move on a little bit to your other practices as well, actually I don't have the time, sorry, that's the thing, I can keep talking for ages and like then I'm like, oh my god. So it's 11:11. That's actually a very good sign, isn't it?
It is indeed.
So you also practice, so you're a voodoo practitioner as well, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Which voodoo is it? Which style, which voodoo?
It is Haitian voodoo. I suppose if you wanted to put a title on it. And I suppose in my experience being in the UK, it's very different to like how things are defined in America.
Right.
You know,
right.
Whereas you might make the distinction between I don't know, Louisiana voodoo, New Orleans voodoo, Haitian voodoo. I feel like in the UK those distinctions are somewhat lessened. And I think that's directly because of the history of like the people who find themselves in this country. And it's something I talk about. So when I was presenting at the Magical Women's Conference, I did a talk on Nanny of the Maroons, you know, the Jamaican national hero who was also an Obeah woman. And actually, a lot of people I found don't understand or don't know about the history of the slave trade in the Caribbean, and then, you know, how we end up in the UK. And so for me, because of all of those different influences, I feel like for Afro-Caribbean traditions in the UK, we don't have that kind of very strict labelling system that you might find somewhere else in the States, because you know the histories are interlinked but also separate.
Because the reason I asked that is because if it was voodoo in Africa, West Africa, to voodoo in, and I know there is like, it's influenced obviously people who moved, well, forced to the Caribbean, and what was I going to say? Sorry, I lost my train of thought now.
It's all right.
Completely lost it now. No, but that's and how did you did you have somebody local who was do you say voodoo? How do you say it? Voodoo?
I say, so if I'm talking to somebody who maybe doesn't understand what it is, and they're like, it's that I will say voodoo because it makes it just for ease of communication. Or when I'm being really serious about it, I will say voodoo. That's how I.
Okay, yeah, we'll say voodoo.
It came up in my I suppose research. So like I said at the beginning, it was very British witchcraft orientated, and which is fine because, you know, my mum is English and white English, and you know, for all its intents and purposes, I'm British, you know. But then, like I said, I always felt that there was something missing, and so you know, books and internet searches and all of that kind of thing really led me to then discover Verdun. And then it was like trying to find something local to me. And so that's kind of how I came into it. So I am just beginning. I'm in the very first stages of doing my Manbo training. And I think some people don't necessarily realise the structure of Verdun. So I often kind of say it's similar to like going to church. So you might have the priest or the vicar or the minister at front leading, and then you have the congregation. And it's almost similar. So you can be a voodooisant, which is like being part of a congregation. So you go for spiritual, but then being the Mambo, training to be a Mambo, is pretty much like training to take it further, so to speak. So that's the kind of structure and hierarchy of it. And so, you know, I've been a voodooism for a long time, and then it's recently something that I wanted to kind of progress in. So, hence just lately starting to begin my training. So yeah,
interesting. And like from reading, because I've been doing a lot of reading and research about, you know, intersections of Caribbean spirituality, African spirituality, and something that I, you know, aware of is that actually there was such massive groups across the continent who were all placed together.
Yeah.
It can be like, I mean, within each country you have different tribes, different beliefs, and then, you know, maybe you had people coming from like 5 or 6 African countries, and then they all come together. So that's where they're kind of creating something kind of new, but obviously. But then also what I was reading is that a lot of people enslaved were sold to different islands. So maybe they started off in Jamaica and they were sold to Haiti, and maybe they're in the south of America and then they're coming to the Caribbean. So actually, you know, that for traditions, people would have been moving around and sharing, and you know, there's lots of it wasn't like a fixed thing, you know, where it's like Christianity. I mean, I'm not a Christian, so I don't know a lot about it, but it seems a very prescriptive, this is what it is, read the Bible and that's the rules. But that's not how people in the Caribbean lived. It was very much, we come together and we need to create power and strength, even though we're different, we need to do
that's how. Yeah, I mean, even if we take patois, which is, for people who don't know, which is like the I suppose you could almost call it a Creole language, which is, if we look at the slavery, and so what people would do, what the slave owners would do is to decrease revolts and uprising, they would split up families and tribes. So on any given plantation, you'd have a whole mix of people who spoke different languages. And so that's kind of how patois came into being. It's got influences from lots of different places. So it's all, you know, you can see it in the development of that as a language, alongside the development of the many different spiritual traditions. And so this is why you end up with, there's not one definitive African or Caribbean practice, even if we look at the same kind of. So I often view Verdun as being a religion separate to Obeah and witchcraft, which I term as spiritualities, because it has dogma. You know, there are set things that you do, and a lot of it depends on your temple or house that you belong to, but there are set things you do at set times, whereas Obeah and witchcraft are very different, and it's really individualized. So even if we take Vodun and it being a religion, that's why you have so many different variants, and you know, one house is going to look extremely different to how another house does it, and I kind of like that, to be honest.
Yeah, and it makes sense, because if your ancestors were from loads of different countries and tribes, and there's going to be that slight difference, isn't there? Because maybe your ancestors were like, actually, this from this country was, this is what you need in your life, so this is why our practice is going to be a little bit different.
Absolutely. And even in Obeah you see that. So, you know, if we look at the origins of Obeah in West Africa, of the Akan people, you know, and if you go there, it's still very much as it was, like back in the day. But then if we look at how it is spread through the Caribbean, and you know, that's why it's very different in wherever you go, even between different islands. It's very different. Like there are some similarities, of course, but the individual practices are very different because of all of the different influences that the people who found themselves in those places encountered, and I think that makes it richer. Personally.
I think so. Yeah, and I think for somebody who's trying to explore African spiritual traditions, I think it's almost they need to let go of the very homogenous religious cultural identity that we have in England. It's very in a box, but I think it's like you need to just completely let go of all of that that you've known, that there's rules and regulations, and then you need to actually connect to your own spirit and your own ancestors. So it's more divine from yourself rather than divine from above,
somebody's
telling you X, Y, Z, do this, do that. But obviously you still have a mentor, you still have priestesses, guides, you know.
And I think it's important that you find someone who you kind of trust. There has to be a level of trust there. You have, you know, and the thing is, even from my own mentor, I do things somewhat differently based on my own experiences with spirit and my own, you know, private goings on. But I feel like if somebody is wanting to kind of get into it, then they have to do a bit of research. Like there are a lot of people like on the internet and all of that kind of thing. And in a way it's good because it opens things up to us, but also it's easy to hide, you know, on the internet, and it's easy to project something that necessarily isn't the case. So research is really good. I would also beware. So when I started the Obeah mentorship program, I was really selective about. So I put the call out there after hearing Eugenie O'Neill speak, and I kind of put the call out there that this is what I was doing, and I was looking to take on between 10 and 15 apprenticeships, apprentices, and I got lots and lots of feedback and lots of applications, and I really did kind of not interrogate the people, but I wanted to make sure that the people I chose were willing and they understood what would be expected of them, because it is a big commitment. You do have to commit, and so, you know, if you are looking for a mentor or someone, be wary of someone who is just willing to accept you and take your money, because there will be those people. You know, if you find someone and you think, oh, well, they're being a bit nosy and they're asking lots of questions, actually, that is a good sign, because they're wanting to make sure that you're aware of what you're undertaking, and also if you know, all of those kind of things. So there's lots of like little pointers and clues you can use. Because
that's really helpful, because it's very, very helpful to everybody who are new. And you're trying to figure out, like, do I go to this person? Do I go to this person? And so do you do divination? Did I see on your Instagram it's something you're starting to do?
So, obviously tarot is like what everybody is used to, but I also do shell divination using cowrie shells, so shell casting, which is learn. I see it as part of my Obeah practice. It was learned from my mentor, and so, it's really something I really enjoy doing as well. But I really just, so far I tend to do it for people who I know or people who I'm close to. So for like some of my people in the course, but I've decided to open it out to people, just because it's getting it out there, I suppose, to people who might be interested in learning it or kind of wanting some other perspective other than tarot. And I love tarot, so it's not like derogatory to tarot, but it's just kind of putting it out there that there are other forms of divination.
And I think that's so let me just read the comment. So all my aunt does shell casting with cowrie shells in Gambia. So it's very common, isn't it, West Africa, using the cowrie shell?
I think in some countries it was even used as currency. So they are, you know, we say cowrie shell. Technically, you could use any shell. So you know, if you didn't want to kind of purchase some, you go along But like cowrie shells, they have a special significance for people with African and Caribbean ancestry because of the value placed on them.
Yeah, although I was listening to a podcast recently where they were actually going into the details that cowrie shells were used to pay for slaves, and it was a form of currency in enslavement. So it has, I suppose, like everything, there's that complexity, and it's not a straightforward black and white. This is
absolutely good. Yeah, and it's about going into things fully aware and with knowledge. You know, everything has a history. If we look at witchcraft or Obeah or voodoo, everything has a history, and it's important that we learn that history as well as learning the traditions. And I think if you learn the history of a particular place, then that can really help you with your own spiritual practice. 100%.
Definitely. So let me just check the time. So we're at 11:25. So just to kind of wrap up our discussion, which is amazing. I could listen to you all day, but so if somebody would like to contact you to maybe buy your book, they're interested in what you're doing, how can people connect with you? What's the best way to do it?
Well, I'm on the social media platform, so it's Emma Kathryn, Wild Witch, on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So please feel free to drop me a message on there. If you're interested in maybe some of the things I write, then you can check out the Gods and Radicals website, which is abutiresistance.org. I also write for places like the House of Twigs and Which Way magazine, which is very like magical kind of spiritual. And I also have my own blog, which is Emma Kathryn Wild Witchcraft, so you can find me on all of those things.
Fantastic, amazing. And are you offering any sort of workshops or courses or anything like that?
I always have something on the go. So I do a lot of courses for Gods and Radicals, which are linked to the Reclaiming book. So it's called Reclaiming Ourselves. I think we are looking to run the next one in September. And what I love about the Gods and Radicals courses is that they have a sliding scale payment option. So like it's about making it accessible for most people. But always check out, I tend to just kind of put on my social medias and on the blog when I've got something coming up. So I do plant medicine workshops, tarot workshops, a whole host of things, but I always tend to kind of put them on the social medias when they come up. So if you give me a follow, if you're really interested in doing that kind of stuff,
I'm sure there'll be lots of people interested, definitely, you know, and getting that information from a trusted source. That's something that people really, I think people really need that in this time. Like we need that discernment, and like actually there is that connection, and like I met Jay and you're her mentor, so I feel like this is a trustworthy source of information, because like you said, some people, they're pretending they've got more knowledge, or their ethics are not quite as in line.
And the thing is, I think when you're at that point where you're really wanting to seek out that knowledge, and you know, it's almost like you find someone and they're offering this, and it's so tempting to go, right, I'm going to pay for it, I'm going to do it. But just kind of take a step back, do some research on the person as well. If they are genuine, they really won't mind you asking questions and kind of, you know, before you sign up to anything and send them some money, you know, they really won't mind you asking questions about themselves and what it is you do. So always go in and don't be afraid to ask questions of someone.
That's brilliant advice. Really brilliant advice. So thank you so much for our discussion today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been brilliant. It's been so good, and I will definitely keep up to date with some of your. I'd love to attend I like tarot, you know, herbs and all sorts of things. So I will keep a lookout and I'll be attending definitely. So
awesome.
Have a great weekend, and thank you so much. Thanks everybody for watching the live or on the replay as well. It's appreciated. So bye.
Thanks again. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.